This development log series is meant to showcase the progress of development for my current project. These will have very little in terms of editing because I would rather spend more time on development of the game. This specific devlog is made with the intention of showcasing my thought process when designing the game itself. For context, DK64 is one of, if not my favorite collectathon platformer of all time. I can go on, just like so many others have, about the Kongs and their expressive personalities, the colorful and imaginative levels, and of course, the amazing music composed by the legend himself, Grant Kirkhope. I am well aware of the reputation DK64 has in the modern day, and even though it is my favorite collectathon, does not mean I turn a blind eye to genuine criticism. I even agree with some critiques. So, this video is for discussing those critiques and my own opinions on them, how I take them into account when designing gameplay loops and systems for my own collectathon platformer inspired by DK64. Let's first define the two types of collectathon platformers from my own experiences. Games like DK64, Banjo-Kazooie, and Tooie are what I would call open-ended collectathons, where you enter a level and you can explore to your heart's content with the possibility of collecting absolutely everything within it. Some levels may have required collectibles and or upgrades you need to progress through the game as a whole, but each level is essentially a collection of puzzles and challenges that can be done one after another and sometimes in any order. And in terms of overall progression, you are expected to collect multiple objects. Golden bananas and jiggies are considered the main collectible, but you also are required to collect a certain amount of colored bananas and music notes. The second type of collectathon comes from games like Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and A Hat in Time. I like to call these mission-based collectathons. When you enter a stage and you have the option of picking a specific mission to complete, like defeating King Babam in Babam Battlefield or cleaning the teeth of an eel in Noki Bay. Each level has a set of missions, each with a specific objective. And a lot of the time, the layout, enemies, and set pieces of the stage change depending on the mission you selected. You can, for the most part, still freely explore the level during the vast majority of missions, but you are expected to grab the main collectible at the end of each mission and be placed back into the level hub. Some of these missions and stages allow you to collect secret stars or shines, like grabbing 100 coins or finding a secret area, but the main form of progression is just to collect as many stars, shines, and hourglasses as possible. For the most part, other collectibles are just extra bonuses. With those definitions out of the way, I want to design an open-ended collectathon that is heavily inspired by DK64. Well, where do I start with the design process? I first decided to break down DK64 into what I perceive as its two core gameplay loops to help define and analyze what I am looking at. For context, I am modeling these using the definition of gameplay loops as defined by, excuse the pronunciation, Richard Carrillo. That's the best you're going to get from me. In his book, The Role of a Great Game Designer. I highly recommend it for anyone that wants to become a proper game designer. Richard defines three parts, or beats as he calls them, in a loop: the objective, the challenge, and the reward. I will now read excerpts that define these beats. The objective is determined in the first beat and is what the player is trying to accomplish in order to progress the game or enter the finish phase. The challenge is primarily found in the second beat and is what the player must overcome to complete the objective. And the reward, the third beat, is what the player achieves or avoids, including avoidance of a repercussion, after completing the objective. With Richard's definition being said, this is how I view the main game loop of DK64. Objective: stop King K. Rool. The DK crew must stop King K. Rool from blowing up their island home. Challenge: exploration and problem solving. The DK crew must explore a variety of unique and interesting locations utilizing their skills and tools, be it platforming, puzzles, combat, or minigames. Reward: more bananas for the Horde. Thorough exploration and problem solving rewards the Kongs with collectibles that allow them to progress in the game, be it unlocking new levels, abilities, and secrets to discover, all in order to stop King K. Rool. This is what I have defined as the main game loop that players are engaging with whenever they play DK64. But let's zoom in a little further to focus on the actual moment-to-moment gameplay loop that occurs per level. Objective: grab all needed collectibles in a level. To progress to the next level, there are a bare minimum of collectibles that need to be collected. Colored bananas for Trough and Scoff, golden bananas for B-Locker, and banana coins for mandatory upgrades from Cranky, Funky, and Candy. Challenge: explore and determine which Kongs to use. Each level has Kong-specific switches to activate, abilities to use, and bananas to collect. The player must constantly switch between the 5 Kongs to complete puzzles or challenges to collect the bare minimum to progress. Reward: access to a new level. Once the player has gathered the bare minimum of collectibles and fights the boss of the current level, they gain access to a new level to explore. As you might have noticed, the main game loop is fairly broad and can apply to almost all collectathon platformers, while the per level loop describes the average moment-to-moment gameplay experience any one player may have. The per level loop is the one I want to replicate the most with my own project, but it is within the challenge beat of the per level loop of DK64 that I perceive many people have many different gripes with. So now let's take some time to analyze the problems that I perceive others complaining about and discussing why people view them as a problem, if I agree with them or not, and what are some possible solutions to solve them. It is well known that DK64 holds the world record for most collectibles in a video game. And some people say it's way too much, but let's break this down into 2 separate problems. The first part of this problem is that the amount of collectibles is ludicrous. People have voiced their criticisms that this amount is just padding to make the game longer. Well, let's take a look at the bare minimum you need to complete the game. After refreshing myself on all of the requirements the game asks of the player, the numbers themselves are pretty misleading. You only need 50% of golden bananas, 48% of colored bananas, approximately 43% of banana medals to get the rare coin, and then you also need the Nintendo coin, approximately 37 to 50% of blueprints for a relatively comfortable hideout helm timer, 40% battle arena crowns, and less than 20% of all banana coins to purchase every mandatory upgrade. So, overall, you need to collect half or even less of the available collectibles to complete the game. I personally do not see a problem with the game having this many collectibles. In fact, I think it's actually a good thing that there are so many extra collectibles compared to the few that you actually need, because it rewards players for exploring wherever they would like to and not punishing them for not knowing the exact locations of every collectible. This provides a lot of leeway for the average player to miss or forget to collect a good chunk of the game. And for those that want to see everything, well, they have a lot of content to explore. In this aspect, I think DK64 pulled off what Mario Odyssey did nearly 2 decades later. But the other problem that people bring up is that there are just too many unique objects to collect, and it can lead to confusion as to what collecting specific objects unlock. To me, this complaint is far more understandable than the previous due to two outliers: the Rare coin and the Nintendo coin. These two coins are fairly obscured from the main gameplay loop, and they directly prevent the player from accessing the final boss fight if you have not collected both of them. But for everything else, I personally feel that collecting these objects and deducing their purpose, even if you skip tutorials and explanations, is quite straightforward. The two coins themselves should honestly be, in my opinion, a hidden secret for 100% completion, like how the 201st golden banana is hidden behind capturing all the banana fairies. Now, for context, my opinion on these two problems is fairly biased due to me obsessively reading through the DK64 Prima strategy guide as a kid. So, I am very well aware of where all the collectibles are and how to get them. While I do not aspire to come even remotely close to breaking the collectible world record, I still believe that having extra collectibles on the field or in corners of each level rewards the average player that doesn't have a set path planned out and is exploring the game for the first time. The next topic among the problems to talk about is the bonus game barrels. People have voiced their criticisms that some of the games are poorly designed, either by having frustrating controls, unintuitive interactions, and boring gameplay. Which, for some of the bonus games, I absolutely agree, especially for some of the most notorious ones, like Beaver Bother. Now, granted, I know exactly how to counteract the jank by scaring the beavers at specific angles, but that should not be normal. Two other bonus games I have a personal gripe with is the slot machine and the diving game. The slot machine is just a boring yet frustrating timing game where if you mistime a press once, you have to restart the entire minigame. And the diving game has a camera angle with poor depth perception that makes collecting the coins in the water much harder than it has to be. But as a concept, I do like what bonus games bring to the table. A lot of them offer a nice and short change of pace and some unique gameplay to help spice up the overall experience. I would like to implement them into my project, but use them a little more sparingly. Now, let's discuss what I perceive to be the biggest issue others have with DK64. Each of the 5 Kongs can only grab collectibles assigned to them, and because of that, there is constant backtracking to tag barrels. You explore some areas repeatedly because of this backtracking, and the game becomes repetitive and tedious. I can absolutely understand why a lot of people have this opinion. Seeing colored bananas, banana balloons, and coins that are right in front of you, but you just can't collect them because you're not the correct Kong, and having to go all the way back to the nearest tag barrel can be frustrating. The game is actively telling you, you will come back here again. You cannot explore a single area once and be done with it. Another great way to phrase this complaint is from Snowman Gaming's Bad Game Design Donkey Kong 64 video, where as he puts it, instead of a connected world where you have to use the Kongs to work together, it feels like five separate games layered on top of each other. Now, with all of that being said, that is exactly what I love about DK64. I think of each level as a giant puzzle. There are five sections of that puzzle, one for each Kong. Collecting golden and colored bananas slowly fills in that Kong section of the puzzle. And in some levels, the Kongs rely on others to fill in parts of their section first before the Kong you want to switch to can complete that portion of their puzzle. I love planning out how and when I am going to fill out each Kong section of the puzzle. Where do I go? When do I switch Kongs? Do I need to switch right now? What is left to collect with this Kong? I love the process of thinking about these questions and planning out my exploration and collection around them. Are there some instances of tedious level design slash colored banana placement? Absolutely. But for me, those moments are few and far between. Now, granted, as I have mentioned earlier, I have a major bias. I grew up playing this game with the official strategy guide. I loved reading that guide cover to cover, looking at all the item locations, steps for golden bananas, and how to do boss fights. I took this book quite literally everywhere with me to the point that my original copy completely fell apart and my grandma sewed the few pages I had left together. And in third grade, my parents bought me a new one for Easter that I still have to this day. I can visualize and map out the vast majority of almost every single level and their collectibles in my head. So that is a major reason why I have such odd tastes when it comes to DK64. I don't have to explore to discover hidden bananas in a level. So I found enjoyment in the planning and execution of collecting everything. And with that being said, this leads directly into a dislike that I have with a very popular mod for DK64. The Tag Anywhere mod that allows the player to switch to any Kong they have unlocked at the press of a button completely ruins what I love about the game. As I mentioned earlier, I do understand why others dislike vanilla DK64, and I can absolutely see why they would install this mod. And if you like this mod, I am genuinely glad you have found a way to make DK64 enjoyable for yourself. But if I had the ability to immediately switch Kongs, the game would lose its appeal. I don't have to plan where I should go. I just completely clean out one section of the level at a time, just immediately swapping to a Kong that is required and continuing on my journey. To me, that feels like five separate characters just mashed into one game to make a mindless and tedious collectathon. So, if I have conflicting preferences with the vast majority of players, how am I going to design a game that addresses issues a lot of players have while still preserving what I love about the game? As of right now, I have three designs to tackle these problems. First is to allow the player to freely switch between playable characters, just like the Tag Anywhere mod. Although I do not like the mod within DK64, the game was not designed for that system in mind. A vast majority of the game has separated sections for specific Kongs in each level, with only a few instances of synergy between their abilities and how they affect the world. Which leads to my second design choice. I will design parts of each level that will require players to use multiple characters to progress. If players have the ability to freely swap between said characters, then I will purposefully design puzzles and obstacles that utilize multiple characters. For example, I have one character that can push tall stone pillars around, and another that can high jump. So, I can create a puzzle to have the player move pillars with varying heights in a specific arrangement with one character, then use the other character to high jump from one pillar to the next. And the final design choice is an entirely new mechanic. I would still like to create some puzzles and challenges that force the player to use a specific character. So, the new mechanic is some sort of force field slash nullification zone that only allows one specific character to freely move around said zone. There will be a totem slash obelisk of some kind within the zone that the player must reach and destroy to deactivate it, and in turn allow the other characters to be used in that area. I believe if I utilize this properly within the level design, I can replicate the feeling of completing the section of a puzzle with one character, which allows another character to complete their own part of the puzzle. Of course, I will have to be very mindful of how I utilize these nullification zones, or else I will replicate the same issues others have with DK64. But that is what playtesting is for. In the end, this is a personal project meant to further develop my skills as a designer and programmer. Anyone who is a game designer or is aspiring to be one is well aware of the nonstop avalanche of layoffs that have been occurring across the entire industry for the past 2 years. And with no signs of it getting better anytime soon, I am dedicating myself to improve my skills and bolster my portfolio to show future employers how passionate and dedicated I am. For anyone else concerned about entering the industry, do what I'm doing. Spend your free time furthering developing your skills on a passion project and share it with the world. Make sure to properly scope out the project, especially if you are making it by yourself like I am, but don't be afraid to branch outside of your perceived skill set. For years, I always thought that learning programming was too difficult, and I convinced myself I needed to rely on a programmer to make any games. But after challenging that negative self talk and finding a great resource to learn from, I am far more confident in my skills as a programmer than I have ever been. I still want to be hired as a designer, but having skills and knowledge outside of that sphere makes me a better designer. So I encourage you to do the same. I want to thank you for watching, and you should see a more straightforward devlog discussing features I have implemented and development troubles I came across within a month or two. See you then.